Everyone, and welcome back to another video for another speed build. Now this one is again in Eternity Isle, and I am now doing Eric's build finally in the Oasis. I've had Eric's house sat here literally since I got the DLC, because as soon as I opened this Oasis area I knew his house would fit perfectly, because it's got that nice balance between the desert and also kind of like a jungle, and it just works with his house so well. So I'm finally not procrastinating and I'm going to finally do this build for his house. So let's get started. So when I first went in, I obviously started mapping out a pathway. Now I had no clue what pathway I wanted to use here. I wanted it to kind of be as natural as possible. So I started off with this like kind of natural stone pathway, and as you will see later on, I play around with this a lot and end up completely changing it. But for now I just mapped out where I wanted the path to go, as this area obviously has a lot of entrances and exits to different things. So I kind of had to get ready with how I wanted it to look before I started placing in the first few furniture items. Now with this build I had zero plans for it. Genuinely, I knew where I wanted Eric's house to go and kind of just some of the things I wanted to include, but for the most part I just completely did it at the time as I felt it worked and I was inspired to do. So if you do see me chop and change everything and redo things multiple times, I do apologise, but that was just naturally how it happened when I did the build. And yeah, it ended with the final result being how I wanted it, but it did take me some time to get there. Now one thing I didn't expect to put in this area but I actually ended up loving was the Fountain of Youth that we got in the premium shop. It is a Pirates of the Caribbean item, but I was really struggling for months and months and months of where to put this. I had it in the glade at one point, then I had it on the beach, and then I had it in other places, and I just could not figure out a good spot where it wasn't it just didn't look strange and didn't take up too much room and it wasn't too bulky. And when I was doing this build and I saw it, I thought actually it is perfect in here, because it does seem like kind of a really old ancient structure, and it just looked like such a nice little landmark to kind of have in this larger spot at the back where I really was struggling with what to put there, because it is so huge. Now as you can see with the pathway, I started placing in some of the tropical wood. Now I did want to do this originally, but I wasn't sure how I was going to be able to integrate it with the path without it looking weird. So I did kind of place it where I wanted it to go, and at first I started removing bits of the pathway just so it wasn't sticking out too much and kind of laid flat under the wood planks. But later on you'll see I do just end up doing the wood planks on their own. It just looked a lot more natural, which was kind of the vibe I was going for the whole build. But it did take me some time to kind of decide what I wanted to do with that. Now one little spot I knew I definitely wanted to include early on was this little seating area by the water. I used some of the craftable chairs as well as a craftable little ottoman and a craftable barbecue. So everything here is completely craftable, none of it's from Scrooge, and I wanted to make this cute little seating area by the water where people would hang out and eat. Now around this build, a lot of the stuff is craftable because I wanted to use a lot of the natural resources, so like barrels and the wishing well and things like that, just because it really fit with the natural vibe I was going for. But it also does mean that this build is a lot more accessible for those of you who don't have a lot of Scrooge items, but you can craft all these things. There are some things obviously from Scrooge that you'll be able to see throughout that are kind of dotted about, but for the most part, majority is craftable if you have the DLC and the base game. Obviously if you don't have the DLC, then this build could definitely be utilised in a different area of the main valley. You would just have to obviously change the location and change some of the resources I used to those that are in the base game, but it is definitely still doable. Now, as I started off with the trees and the foliage, I had to kind of decide what ones I wanted to use because I wanted to have a real balance of a lot of different things. So I wanted to include a couple of jungle trees to tie in with the fact that the Oasis is more overgrown and more natural looking, but I also wanted to include some of the desert trees and the little palm trees, but I also wanted to use a lot of the desert trees and the cacti and things like that, as obviously the Oasis is adjacent to the desert and still has that kind of desert vibe. And as well as that, I did include a lot of palm trees. Obviously on Eric's home there are palm trees attached to the building, so it made complete sense to obviously use palm trees to kind of keep that look going through the whole build. Around the Fountain of Youth, I really loved putting in all of the trees and bushes and everything just to make it quite covered over, just so it looked like something that had been here a long time and was kind of like an ancient statue. I kind of liked that vibe of making it look quite overgrown in comparison to the rest of the build, so I just felt like adding lots of bushes and trees really did help the structure kind of pop. Now, as I went in with bushes and things like that, I did add a lot of beach grass around. Obviously the beach grass is much more of a lighter green, so I feel like it should just make this area feel a lot more alive, and I kind of like utilising this in areas like this just to give it a bit more texture. As the main areas had been built and everything was starting to come together, I added the final kind of bushes and plants and things like that. I used a mixture of ones from the base game as well as the DLC, just because obviously in this area I wanted to have that nice balance between a more kind of overgrown jungle as well as the desert and a bit of a beachy vibe. So it was a bit of a mishmash of everything, which I think worked out really well in the end because it just makes the area look so lovely. But obviously it did utilise a lot of different plants, so that is why there's kind of a mismatch of everything going on. Now in the water I added a few bushes and reeds. I didn't add too many of the other items like the light up lily pads and things like that. I didn't want it to look too kind of out of place, and I felt like using a lot more of the green foliage worked a lot better. For flowers, I had added some of these small naturally spawning cacti from the desert. They were the only real flowers I decided to use. I just felt like they worked really well, and I didn't want this area to look too kind of looked after in the sense of there being colourful flowers everywhere, whereas I feel like the cacti just gave it that nice little pop of colour. One of the final things I did was obviously added a lot of melted candles. I love to do this in my build. The melted candles just work way too well to not be used everywhere down pathways and make everything glow really beautifully. So around all of the wooden plank pathways I did add in a bunch of these, as well as on some of the crates and things like that dotted about, just to bring an extra warm glow to the build. So that is the final build. I have made it sunset so you can obviously see the biome in its best time of day, and as we head up the stairs from the plains we can obviously see the entranceway, which immediately is so overgrown and just has that nice mix of a beach feel but also very desert-like, which I really love. I'm really happy I went with the wooden pathway. I think it works much better than another, like a natural kind of pathway that we can craft. I feel like this just looks really like natural and just very fit with the kind of piratey theme that Eric's house has, but it just worked really well. And as we get to the front we can obviously see Eric's statue there in front of the house. I placed some of the fountains from the star path next to the home as they worked really well with that kind of stone structure that his house has. And on the right there's a little telescope where you can look over into the bottom of the oasis, and as we lead up to this little hidden area at the top I just made one of the craftable outhouses and some crates and things like that, so it just looks like that's somewhere you might go up to store things or to kind of see what's going on. For lighting in the area I used different flame lights as well as the melted candles and the lanterns because they all have a nice warm yellow glow. I wanted everything to kind of match. And as we head down you can obviously see in front of us we have a little bench on the side where people might sit and hang out. Obviously barrels I've kind of included all through the biome just to give a pirate vibe. And up the top we have the Fountain of Youth surrounded by some of the craftable statues that we can make. It just made it seem a lot more natural and kind of blended it in with everything. And on the left we have the little seating area with the barbecue where people can overlook the water, which just has a couple of the craftable canoes in. I feel like adding these to the water just makes it have a little bit more character and not look as bland and plain. And on the right we have another little seating area just with one of the Moana chairs and a little campfire there. I included a globe and some books just because they fit really well with Eric's character, so I wanted to bring a bit of that into kind of the outdoors of his home as well. And then we just have our little exit out to the rest of the dunes. So that is the final build. I've obviously included some shots of how everything looks. Obviously this was a very big area to try and decorate, so I had to kind of think about how I wanted to position things and what things I wanted to include, but overall I didn't want it to be too built up. I wanted it to be very natural, to be a mainly kind of foresty area, and I think I managed to achieve that really well. I'm really happy I included a couple of little areas where people can sit and things like that, but overall I'm really happy with how it turned out. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about the build I did and whether you like where Eric's house is. I was umming and ahhing for a while whether it would be in a different place in the desert, but as soon as I saw the DLC and we had a desert I knew his house would be going here, so I'm happy I've finally done the build and it is completely finished. Make sure you like and subscribe and I will see you in the next one. Bye!